Yo guys, welcome back to a brand video. So today we're going to be going over the best builds for all 90 brawlers in the game. Let's get straight into it. First up is Shelly. Now this is going to be the most basic build for Shelly you can go here. I think this build is pretty good. You could probably replace this with damage gear or maybe even shield gear, but I do think this is the right build to go for Shelly. Nita is dependent on the game mode. If it's heist, for example, you want to probably go this build. I think this build is going to be really good for heist. In terms of gears, I think speed and damage is pretty much the only gears you need. And then if it's any other game mode, I think you just do like this build. This build, for example, is pretty strong. And then if you're playing against a tank, maybe you can try out the stun as well. But the stun is not really too strong here. I do like this build a lot better. Poco, it is situational here. If you're playing a comp which requires a wall break, I recommend you do this star power. If you're playing heist, for example, then I recommend you play this gadget. This gadget is pretty good. In terms of gears, if you're playing against sharpshooters, you kind of want shield gear so you don't get too tapped by like a Piper or something, for example. So yeah, this build works pretty well. And then star power, I think Magnum special always. I don't really see a scenario where you end up using the other star power. Ball, I think there is only like one way to play ball. I think maybe like this or this in terms of gears. And then this star power, I think all the time, no matter what. Even in heist, I think this star power is better because you just need to get on safe with the shield. And then Stomper gadget just allows you to make so many different plays and have that element of surprise. Brock, it depends on the matchup, but if you want to use Brock as a wall break, then I recommend you going rocket fuel. If not, then you can try out the jump. The jump is good at jumping over places, dodging Piper curves or any Nani shots, Nani peeps, stuff like that here. Making plays with the jump is possible. And in star power, I'm telling you guys, 100% of the time you want to go this star power. Don't even bother with this other star power, because if you have reload gear, there is 0 point of having 4 ammo, having rocket number 4. So that's why I recommend you guys just to go more rockets here. Your super gets more value, and with reload gear, it's basically like having 4 ammo anyway. So this is the build I would do in terms of gears. Shield gear and then reload gear is a must. Next up is going to be Primo. Primo, most of the time you want to go suplex supplement, because you know, if you're playing against a tank counter, you kind of want to throw behind them and keep charging forward and just running in a straight line. And then in terms of star power, I think the El Fuego is good for damage here. If you're playing Brawl or something, maybe you want to go for speed so you can, you know, jump on people and catch up to them straight away here. In terms of gears, I recommend doing like speed damage or speed heal. Something like that can be pretty good. If you want to try out speed shield as well, that's not going to be too bad for you. Next build for Barley. Barley is very flexible here. In terms of gears, I would recommend you guys doing this with the build. I think damage and shield is pretty good, or you can do damage and the gadget cooldown as well. That's not too bad. If you're playing against a tank, I suggest you going this build here. Sticky syrup to have a slow, and then you just deal more damage like this. If you're playing against a thrower or like control brawlers, I recommend you going double heal here. Double heal is very good and makes Barley very hard to kill. Poco is pretty simple here. If you are playing tanks and you're against like a Lou or a Gale, for example, you want to go the anti-stun just to have that extra bit of protection. And I think most of the time you go scooching solo. If you have a Poco double tank comp, you can also just go double heal depending on what type of matchup you play against here. And in terms of gears, I would say you go shield gear, and then you either go the cooldown gear or damage gear, because Poco low-key does loads of damage once he gets in range of someone. Rosa, I would say always go unfriendly bushes. There's very few circumstances where you want to go grow light and make some bushes here. I think most of the time having a slow every 14 seconds is very OP and very underrated mechanic. And in terms of gears here, I think speed and then shield is pretty good, or speed and damage here, as Rosa does get into so many close engagements here, and you probably get loads of value from the damage gear. Jessie, I would say most of the time you want to go probably this build. I think this build is pretty safe to have on Jessie here. The spark plug is pretty good. Even on heist, I think slow gives you a little bit of value though. But if you are lacking a little bit of damage, then you can maybe try and go recoil spring, which gives you some good damage onto safe here. But most of the time, I think spark plug, and then you go energize pretty much every time as well. Being able to heal your turret, your hypercharge turret is just insane value. And then like I said, shield gear and damage gear is a good build to go on Jessie. Dynamike, there is kind of only one right build here. I think you do something like this, or probably like this. I think makes more sense here. You go stun, satchel charge. Even though you get it every 23 seconds, having a stun with Dynamike is so important. If you want stun a lot quicker, then you just go the cooldown gear, which makes it probably about 19 to 18 seconds. And then there's only one right star power, Demolition. There's only very few circumstances you want to go jump here, but Demolition allows you to one-shot so many brawlers in the game, and it is literally game-changing. Next up is Tick. As a Tick main, I suggest just going this build here. There's no other build you do with Tick. This is literally the most Tick-style book you can have. Having a gadget which gives you shield, which allows you to survive certain situations. And then having the mythic gear is pretty strong, because your Tick head is going to be more annoying and harder to kill. And then having well oiled, this is one of the best star powers in the game because it makes Tick so hard to kill as he just instantly starts healing. 8-bit, it depends on your situation here. Most of the time, I do like going this first star power here because having that extra damage with a good comp here with some range can be very annoying to deal with. For example, if you go this star power in Heist or Bounty and you have like a Nani or a Piper just sitting in the turret here, you're going to be doing so much damage. Even in Knockout, for example, this star power is a lot better. If you're playing Gem Grab and you're playing Gem Carrier, I suggest you going plugged in here. Having that extra movement speed, it's going to allow you to go and get extra gems here. If you're playing Heist, I recommend you going extra credits. Any other game mode, I do believe the TP will give you loads of value. In terms of gears, I think reload and heal gear is pretty solid to have. If there's a bunch of bushes and you're playing Gem Grab, for example, Hard Rock Mine, you can try and go like this build here. I think this build is pretty good as a gem carrier as well. Next up is Rico here, and I think Rico is pretty simple. If there's loads of grass here, you can maybe just try and go like this build, for example, Sneaky Field or Center Stage. Having Vision gear can be pretty important. If not, there's no grass and there's still a good Rico map, I recommend you guys going this. And then most of the time, Super Bouncy is good. If you're playing against, for example, tanks, which have movement ability, for example, an Edgar jumping on you, something like that, you can try out Robo Retreat as it allows you to run away from those situations. In terms of gadgets, I like Multi-Ball Launcher. It helps Rico in close engagements against mid-range brawlers and aggros. If you're playing against like a thrower, maybe you want to go heal here because the heal does allow you to survive more situations and push pretty aggressive if you know how to get value with the heal. Darryl, I kind of only like this build. I think this build is pretty solid for most of the time here. And if you're playing Heist, I recommend you going the other gadget because you can actually get 9Ks onto safe if you rotate clockwise. It's good value. In terms of star power, only Steel Hoops. This star power may be good for getting damage on high safe or something, but Steel Hoops is similar to Bull. You just want to get onto safe here. Having that shield allows you to reach the safe. Next up is Penny. I don't think there's many builds you can do with Penny here. I think most of the time it's just this gadget, and then you go this star power as well. Even against tanks, I don't think the knockback is worth it. I think this heavy cone allows you to 6k, 7k, 8k people with one shot combined with the barrel, so I think it's pretty strong. And in terms of builds, I like doing this build sometimes, damage and shield. But if there's like a grassy map, then you want to go speed and vision here. I like speed and vision as well, as Penny can be sort of an assassin sometimes. You just run up people and just 7k them with a barrel. Next up is Carl here. Carl, I only like one build with Carl really. It's going to be Heat Injector and Protected Pirouette here. Against scenarios where you don't need some damage here, because yeah, the fire gadget basically makes up for the lack of damage. You can go Flying Hook, and then in that scenario, you can just go like this, for example. This is pretty good here because when you get into close engagement, your damage gear activates and it just helps you finish off kills. In terms of Jacky here, Jacky's not super meta, but you want to go the first gadget and you want to go Counter Crush always. Counter Crush allows you to have so much damage when you go into the close range engagements. And in terms of gears, I think something like this is pretty good. You could go heal. Damage gear also is not too bad in Jacky because most of the time you're going to be in close engagements, and this damage gear combined with the Counter Crush is a pretty decent combo. In terms of a build for Gus here, QQ Popper is going to be the gadget of choice. And then star power, you always want to go Spirit Animal. This star power is actually really strong. Getting that extra build damage helps you out so much. And in terms of builds here, I like doing this build quite a lot here. If you're gem carrying, you can sometimes switch out to Vision or Shield. But most of the time, I love having Shield Gear and Gus here because it just feels like a very, very tanky brawler. Next up is Bo here. Tripwire, you go most of the time. Unless you have a comp where you just sit very, very passively and you have something with long range that can feed off this Super Totem. Or you want to block some B shots or any supers like that. You can go Super Totem here, but this is the build I go for most of the time. And if you're on a bushy map like Double Swoosh or Snake Prairie, you could try out this Circling Eagle star power, which gives you that extra bit of vision. In terms of gears, I like going this build as well, and if not, you can just switch out shield gear like this, like shield gear and vision, because you know, reload is not needed, but sometimes having that reload can be good. You can also try this out as well here. This wouldn't be too bad. In terms of M's, I only like one build with M's, and it's going to be, for example, this. I think this is a pretty good build to have with M tag. The Friend Zoner is going to be a good knockback against aggros. And then you have Hype as well. Hype allows you to heal so much, and it allows you to cycle super and just be very, very annoying once you keep cycling it. And then Speed Gear, I think, is a must with M's here, just to close that distance and get in range of people. And in terms of gears here, I think Vision, or you can try out Damage Gear as well, can be pretty lethal as M's. Most of the time, it is really good at trading out brawlers. Build for Stu now, depending on what matchup you have, if you are combined with a B or something with long range and like a tank, like an open map you need, then I recommend you going Breakthrough. Breakthrough is a really good gadget against throwers, against tanks, you can just break up the map here. If you're playing against a control comp, then I recommend going Speed Zone, as it, you know, you have more mobility. And if you're against, for example, a B and a B has 4k shot, you can just walk up and tank with your Speed Zone turret. In terms of builds for star powers, I like going speed vision a lot, and then if there's not much grass, then I'll just go speed and damage most of the time, as damage gear can be really good with 2. Piper, there's not much builds you can do here. I think most of the time you want to go snappy sniping and homemade recipe. Unless you're playing maybe shooting star and you're against people with like a little bit of high HP, for example like an RT or a Pearl, you can end up going this star power here. Piper knockback is good against aggro's, but I don't think the knockback is as good as it was before, because yeah, an 18-second cooldown on a knockback, you're going to be vulnerable to tanks anyway, so I think you might as well just go homemade recipe for the most part and go snappy sniping. That's pretty aggro build. And in terms of gears, I would recommend doing this, or you just go damage gear, as damage gear with the Piper can be pretty strong. Pam is not super meta here, but if I was to go a build with Pam here, I would always go Scrap Sucker and Mama Squeeze here. Having that extra bit of damage with the turret can be really good. And also, if anyone tries to push your turret and you place it behind the wall, they'll be taking nearly 1000 damage per second, which is absolutely crazy. And in terms of builds with star powers, I recommend doing something like this here. I think this is a pretty tanky build. As I guys said, Pam is a healer. It's like a mini tank, so you want to just have as much HP as possible. So heal gear is pretty good, and then you go the mythic gear, which allows your teammates to get even more healing. It's just the most tanky build and healer build you can get off Pam. Next up is Frank here. If you're playing against a Lu or any tank counter that has a stun, you can go active noise cancelling. Even a Primo, this star power, this gadget is actually really, really strong. Anything else here, if you're lacking a little bit of damage here, Frank makes it up with this gadget. In terms of star power, you always want to go sponge here. Having sponge is good. Having that extra bit of HP allows Frank to be so annoying. And then in terms of gears, I always kind of go this gear, speed and heal. Heal gear on Frank is super broken because obviously Frank has the most HP in the game here, and being able to heal a lot quicker is just a big benefit to it. Next up is Bibi. There's only one kind of build you can go with Bibi here. I think something like this is pretty good with the Vitamin Booster, which allows you to just heal, which means you can go super aggro. Having Home Run gives you that speed boost, which makes you very, very hard to hit, and that is such a good trait to have. And then just some more speed here with the speed gear and damage gear for some extra damage when you get close up. If there's no bushes on the map there, then you can try and go heal gear or shield gear. Those work out pretty well as well. B, one of the best brawlers in the game right now. This is the build I go with B pretty much all the time. Like literally no other build you go. If you're playing on sneaky fields, for example, you can change the damage gear to vision gear, and if there's no grass or anything, again you can play damage gear, or you go this cooldown reduction gear, which allows you to use Route Hive a lot more frequently. And then star powers, I would say Honeycomb is a must do. You don't really want to change it. Having the shield is so big. Nani is a pretty good counter to all sharpshooters here, and this is the sharpshooter build you want to go here. I think most of the time, even on heist for example, you just want to go this type of build here, because most of the time in heist is sharpshooters like Angelo, Piper, Belle, and Return to Sender is the play. And then autofocus just allows you to get easy kills with a Nani head if you know how to use them. And in terms of gears, shield and damage is pretty much the play you go. Edgar is a pretty straightforward brawler. I think Fisticuffs allows you to win so many more engagements and keep cycling your super, which is pretty strong. Let's Fly is the gadget you need, because without super, Edgar is pretty useless. And then shield gear and cooldown reduction gear is pretty important, because you just need as many gadgets as possible. If not, then having a hard stock Edgar is not really good. Next up is Griff here. Most of the time, you go Piggy Bank. You don't really go the other gadget ever, unless you need some damage against some tanks. Reload gear is pretty important, and shield gear as well. And then I like going this heal star power, because it means you can keep shooting with Griff, and you're going to be healing up. If you're playing against tanks here, then I recommend going this build here. This build is the ultimate damage build. Having this gadget allows you to have more shots, and then this gadget, this star power allows you to hit more shots as well, as your coins go a lot quicker. Grom is going to be the next brawler here. Most of the time, if you're playing heist, you want to go this gadget here. This gadget is so strong for damage, and even a knockout sometimes. If you're playing Belle's Rock, this gadget will get so much value as the gas closes in. You're going to be in a restricted area, and it can be a little bit difficult to juke this gadget. Star power, you want to go this pretty much all the time here. Having that extra bit of damage helps Grom get killed. In terms of star power build, I like going this. If I'm playing a heist, then maybe I do this build, because then I get my gadget more frequently. If you're playing a game mode where there's loads of bushes or you need to tank shots, I recommend going the turret. The turret allows you to just block shots, and on Snake Prairie or Flaring Phoenix, you can use this to get vision. Bonnie is not really meta here, but if you were to go Bonnie here, Sugar Rush is a must needed gadget. And in terms of gear, you go Epic Gear here. Epic Gear allows you to get your super in 3 shots, which is a big difference maker. And in terms of gears, I would either go cooldown, because you get your gadget quicker, which is pretty important. Or you go damage gear, as most of the time when you jump in, you're going to end up being low HP, and maybe it changes some interactions for you. Star power, you always want to go Black Powder, as if you can launch yourself across the map. It's going to allow you to cover more distance and be more surprising. Gale, it depends on what you're playing. If you're playing hot zone, you might want to go spring ejector to get that extra little boost at the start of the game, and having a jump pad for your teammates to jump on into the zone is very, very strong here. And then if you're playing against tanks, I recommend going blustery blow, which allows you to stun them. Or if you want to play against tanks as well, you can also try out the slow. The slow keeps them you know, further back here, and you have more control. And also the slow allows your teammates to hit easy shots, because once they're slowed, guys, they can't move too much, and it's gonna be very easy to hit them. In terms of star power, in terms of gear builds, I would say go shield gear and damage gear. If you're playing on a map with loads of bush, then you can end up going speed and vision as well. That's something I like to do. Next up is Colette. Colette, most of the time, it's going to just be straightforward here. If you're playing heist, you want to go this build as well. Even against tanks, for example, I would say you can end up going this shield star power, because most of the times tank can actually kill you. But if you're playing against maybe like a Chuck or something like that, or something that's very vulnerable and that doesn't do too much damage when you go into them. For example, a Bull would pretty much destroy a Colette or a Shelly, so you don't want to go knock back against that. But yeah, if there's not anything they can do close range, then I recommend push it. Push it is a really, really easy way to cycle your super. Belle, most of the time you go nest egg. If you're playing knockout, then you can end up going reverse polarity, as it allows you to hit more shots and get better angles onto enemies and make some cool plays. Positive feedback is what you go against sharpshooters and control brawlers. If you're playing against tanks, you can end up going grounded, which means they can't reload for 5 seconds, which is a really, really good thing. In terms of gears, I pretty much always go shield gear and reload gear. Ash is going to be a super strong brawler currently. I always go speed gear and damage gear with it. And in terms of star power and gadget, it pretty much stays at first bash and it stays at chill pill. Lola just received a hypercharge, and the best build for Lola is going to be freeze frame, which allows you to keep your super alive longer. And then depending on the matchup here, I like having damage against tanks or high HP brawlers. If you're playing against control brawlers, then sealed with a kiss allows you to stay alive a lot longer and be more annoying. In terms of gears, reload gear is pretty strong, and then the other one doesn't really matter here. Damage gear, shield gear, and speed gear is what I go most of the time. Sam just received a hypercharge as well here. I always go magnetic field with it. Having that pull allows you to get closer to enemies, and then high recovery allows you to heal and spam the gloves and just keep spamming healing, which allows you to just stay alive longer, be more annoying, and make more plays. In terms of gears, with Sam, I like going shield gear and damage gear, as it allows you to just have that extra of HP and damage. Mandy's going to be a really good brawler here. Star power, I always go the first star power here. Having that extra speed on the shot allows you to never miss a shot, really, if you're good at aiming. In terms of gears, I like going shield gear. You can go damage gear as well sometimes. It's really, really strong. And in terms of gadgets here, going slow against mid-range brawlers or high HP brawlers is really good. If you're playing a map, for example, Belle's Rock, you can go Cookie Crumbs, which allows you to pierce through the walls, and maybe you can find some good angles and make some cool plays. Maisie, I like quite a lot currently. I think Maisie's in a good spot here. I always go the dash here. The dash is the first gadget, and it allows you to do some cool tricks with the super. And then I always go Tremors, which allow you to slow your opponents whenever they get supered. In terms of gears, I always go shield and either damage or vision here. I kind of switch between the two, but both are pretty strong. Tank has just received a nerf, and I think he's pretty okay. I don't think he's the best brawler in the game anymore. But most of the time, I go barricade here. If you're playing against a tank, maybe you can try and go in water balloons, which allows you to slow down your enemy. I think it's pretty underrated. In terms of star power, you always want to go the shield. The shield allows, not the shield, you always want to go the first star power, which allows you to have more movement speed, and it allows you just to catch up to enemies. In terms of gears, you can always go this build. I think this build is pretty convenient for Hank here. If you just want more HP, then you can end up going this. If there's loads of bushes, then I recommend going speed gear, because again, having extra speed allows you to get more value on with your shots and allows you to catch up to enemies. Pearl is a brawler I like quite a lot here. I always go overcooked. That burn damage adds up so much and is so lethal. And then having heat shield allows you to play very passive. You can tank shots while walking up, and it's just pretty underrated. In terms of gears, I always like going this build here, because again, like I said, the overcooked gadget is so good. Burning enemies is a really good damage dealer. And then heal gear allows you to just heal, because Pearl tends to take a lot of damage here, especially when you end up going this shield star power. Lawrie and Lawrie is a pretty good thrower to have here. Most of the time, it is used on maps with a little bit of bushes, and I think having that extra speed is pretty strong here. I like going this build most of the time. You can switch out for damage if you need a little bit of damage as well. In terms of gadget, you always go this gadget. If you're playing against a control brawler, you go the first star power. If you're playing against a tank, you go the second star power, which allows you to just deal so much more damage. Next up is Angelo, one of my favorite brawlers in the game. In terms of gadgets, I always go Pierce most of the time, unless you're playing against brawlers that have surprise elements. For example, you got Lily, you got Mortis rushing you and stuff, you always go jump then. In terms of star power, I go this, unless you're playing like Canal Grande, for example. This is the only map I think I would ever play speed. Gears wise, I always go shield gear. Having that extra bit of shield and HP makes Angelo a little bit more comfortable to play. In terms of gears here, I think most of the time I go this because the Pierce gadget is a really cheap thing to use. And you get it so quickly, it's super easy to cycle. If you need a bit more damage, then you can just end up going shield and damage. Berry, I think, is a really good support brawler. It did receive a nerf recently, but I still think it's in a pretty good spot. This is pretty much the build I go everywhere, just having damage, shield. This gadget allows you to just knock back enemies and heal your teammates, which helps you charge your super. And then you always go this star power as well here. If you're playing heist, then I would recommend you going this gadget, because this gadget allows you to get so much more damage and it lasts way longer. Shade, I think, is a pretty underrated brawler here. I think this is the only build you can go with Shade here. Having that shield when you super is pretty important, and long arms allows you to cycle super and again. Shield gear and damage gear is what I go pretty much all the time. If you don't want damage gear, which I don't know why you wouldn't, because you will be getting into so many interactions with damage gear, you can go the gadget cooldown. Meeple is one of my favorite brawlers in the game. It has good kits. I think you can change both gadgets depending on what you play against. I think both can be used against whatever. If you're playing against a tank, then I recommend you going Rage Quit. But you can play the box against tanks as well. It has box in them, and then having your teammates super or shoot them through walls with your super as well is a great way to farm and keep cycling. In terms of gears, I like going damage here. I think damage gear is pretty good with Meeple. If you don't like damage gear, then I end up going shield. I think having this gadget cooldown is very important with Meeple, as the gadget cooldowns did increase from the recent balance changes. And in terms of star powers, I always like going this. Having extra damage when you pierce your shot through the wall is really important. Mortis is pretty straightforward for the most part. Always go survival shovel. Having that extra reload for 4 seconds allows you to cycle and make crazy plays. Bat storm, I like having the bats go a lot quicker when you super, because it allows you to cycle, easier to hit multiple enemies, and again, like I said, it's easier to cycle because of that. In terms of star power, you always want to go Coiled Snake. Having that extra long dash a lot quicker allows you to make more plays. And then shield gear or damage gear is what I would switch with. If you're against a comp where you need damage, I recommend going shield. If you're against sharpshooters and control brawlers, I recommend going shield. Tara, I think, is not in the best place. It did receive a decent buff here, but I do think Tara just lacks a little bit of mobility to catch up to enemies. But in terms of star power, I like going this against brawlers that don't have much DPS, and or brawlers that have bad reload, and then this against brawlers that have high DPS, because then if they shoot you, you're just gonna be able to heal. And even if you waste your super, guys, having a healing is not a bad thing. In terms of gadgets here, unless you're playing Snake Prairie, I recommend going this star power. I mean, this gadget here, support from beyond, is very annoying. Having 3 pets spawn in, tank for you. You can tank gene pulls, you can tank piper shots, walk up and close the distance. Gears, I always go damage and vision, unless you're playing like on a bushy map, where sometimes instead of damage, I like going vision gear. Gene, one of my favorite brawlers. I think this is the pretty straightforward build here. You can go vision gear or shield gear. Star power magic pulse is pretty good. If you lack a little bit of damage, then you can change to spirit slap. I think spirit slap is really good against Carl and Mortis and Melody. And in terms of gadgets, vengeful spirits is pretty good at just spamming them throughout the game here. Again, if you need a little bit of extra protection, then you can go the knockback, which allows you to just knock them back and heal 10% of your HP. Max, one of my favorite brawlers in the game, and it has been for the past like 5-6 years. Run and gun is pretty solid for the most part. Allows you to have that extra DPS, and I don't really see a point of having this as well, because going aggro with Max is one of the best things you can do, and it makes it more skillful. Gadget, always go phase shift. I'd never buy that other gadget. It's a complete waste. Gears, I always go shield and damage for the most part. If you want to go like a crazy aggro build, then you can try go speed and vision, which, you know, once you detect someone in the bush, you can keep on pressing them and focusing them the whole time. Mr. P, I think he's one of the best brawlers, maybe even top 3 or top 2 in the game. Portal reinforcement, able to just spam your gadget throughout the game is very important, and it also provides a little bit of vision, because the Mr. Peoples follow people in the grass even if you can't see them. In terms of gears, I like going shield, and again, this gadget cooldown gear allows you to spam the gadget even more. And then star powers, I would say revolving door 100% of the time, because Mr. P, it doesn't matter about your shots, it just matters about your super. Sprout, I think there's only one real build you can do here. Sprout, you got overgrowth. Having that extra bit of range is what Sprout misses sometimes, and having that every 5 seconds is important. Gadget transplant allows you to replace your wall. It's a really good mechanic to have and master. And in terms of gears, I like going shield and speed here. If you want to cycle your super a little bit more, then you go this epic gear. If you want a little bit more damage, then you can do this build. There's so many builds you can do in terms of gear with Sprout here. There's no right or wrong. Byron, there's only one straight build you can do with it, I think. Booster shots is one of the best gadgets in the game here because it's a triple shot which poison people, and basically you would never miss it. If you miss it, then you're just bad. I don't know. And the melees, you go most of the time against healers or brawlers with high HP because then they heal basically nothing. Or if you're playing against a Russ or a Penny, you can end up going injection, which allows you to pierce your shot every 3.5 seconds. In terms of gears, I would go shield because Byron has very, very low HP. And I think the gadget cooldown gear is pretty important for Byron as this gadget becomes a lot more OP. Squeak did receive a nerf recently, so this gadget did take a little bit of a hit, but I still think 14 seconds is a good timer for it, so I do recommend you going it on maps where there are not many choke points. If there's a map with loads of choke points, then I recommend you going residue, as the slow allows you to get loads of area control. In terms of builds, I like going this build here. Having shield or damage gear is like pretty good here, and then I always go gadget cooldown as Squeak is pretty dependent on the gadget. In terms of star power, I always go chain reaction as having extra damage is really important for Squeak. Lou, one of the best tank counters in the game, has received multiple nerfs, but I think is in still a really good spot. In terms of gears, I always go Cryo Syrup. I think Cryo Syrup allows you to just cycle your super more often and catch people off guard instantly when you super. In terms of gears, I like going Epic Gear because it can be a little bit difficult to hit all your loose shots. If you're comfortable hitting your loose shots, then I recommend going Damage or Vision, depending on the map. And Shield Gear also pretty important in terms of just having more HP on Lou. In terms of star powers, Hypothermia is the best star power because Hypothermia allows you to just reduce people's damage, and when they do no damage here, Lou becomes a little bit more tanky as a mid option. Plus, not the super meta brawler here, but still has a fantastic hypercharge. Most of the time, I think you go air support here. If you're against a brawler which has a single shot, I recommend going take cover just to have that extra bit of protection. In terms of star power, you always want to go air superiority. Having that wall break is pretty important most of the time. And in terms of gears, I recommend going speed vision, speed damage, or you go like this here. This is a pretty tanky and aggro build with Ruff. Buzz is one of my favorite brawlers in the game currently, as it is a really good draft brawler, which I highly recommend. This star power is criminally underrated. This star power is such a game changer. It allows you to win so many more interactions. Literally that 0.5 seconds making a big difference. If you're against a matchup which you might struggle getting super with, I recommend going the second star power, which increases your super radius. In terms of build here, I like going damage and heal. If you lack a little bit of distance and there's loads of bushes, you can go shield and heal you can go speed and heal as well. In terms of gadget, you always want to go the first gadget, as having a hook is very important when you sometimes can't even get super and close the distance between enemies. Fang, I think there's only one build you can do with Fang here. I think fresh kick, being able to cycle your super once you defeat an enemy is important. And then having a stun is really good as well here. In terms of build with gears, I can recommend speed and damage, or if you don't want speed, you can do shield and damage. I think this is the best. Eve is a solid knockout brawler and sometimes a good bounty brawler here. In terms of gadget, you always want to go gotta go. Jumping is a good mechanic to have. In terms of star power, I like going in natural order. Having your highest dealing shot first is important because obviously Eve's shot is pretty slow, and the back shot, it would be the highest damage if you don't go the star power. So yeah, you always want to have the first shot accuracy with the first star power. In terms of gears, I like going vision and shield sometimes, but if you want to go super annoying build here, reload and mythic gear is the way to go. Janet, one of my favorite brawlers as well. It has a really OP hypercharge. This is the build you go at Janet most of the time here. Drop the base allows you to cover some vision with the turret, and also it allows you to stop enemy healing as well. It's pretty annoying to deal with if they don't have anything to take it out, like a thrower or something that pierces through the walls. In terms of star power, you always want to go vocal warm-up, as your shots are very quick and allows you to rescan and redirect onto people. In terms of when to use a jump gadget, if you're playing against a thrower or something you need to avoid, like a buzz super, you can go the jump gadget and just press it instantly. This even works with gene pulls. Gears, I always go pretty much shield and damage. I think this is the perfect gears for Janet. Otis is a really good tank counter, and in my opinion, pretty underrated. You always want to go the second gadget and the second star power. That is like a must. And in terms of gears, I like going speed and vision. If there's no bushes on the map here, then you can go speed and shield, or you can go something like this as well. This is pretty good. Bustle with the introduction of the hypercharge is pretty solid. You always want to go slow-mo replay. Having that pull is pretty important. And then Kevlar vest allows you to be immune to any stuns, and you take 10% less damage, which is pretty important. In In terms of gears, I like going shield and damage, or I go speed and shield, as Buster can be a pretty good assassin as well. Gray, one of my most picked brawlers in ranked here. I always go this build here. This build is pretty good. Fake injury allows you to tank the next shot by 50%. And the Gray hook is pretty important at making some tricks with it and just pulling enemies towards you. And it's a pretty good way to break up the map. In terms of gears, I like going shield gear pretty much all the time. And then I switch between gadget cooldown and damage gear depending on what type of matchup I'm playing against. RT is a pretty good sharpshooter, has loads of HP, which makes him very different to all the other sharpshooters. In terms of builds, I always go hacks, which is the second gadget, and I always go the first star power. If you're playing against a brawler like a Mortis or a Melody, I recommend going the second star power and the first gadget. It allows you to be more of a mid-range brawler slash assassin. But in terms of gears, I always end up going this speed gear, as speed is very important regardless, and then damage gear as well is pretty nice to have. If you don't want damage gear, then you can end up going a heal gear or a shield gear if you're going like this type of build, as this will be the most tanky build you can do with RT. Willow, not the best brawler in the game, but, you know, it is still viable into some matchups here. I like going the dive gadget. The dive gadget allows you to stay alive in some situations. And then Obsession is pretty good to have as well, as, you know, when you mind control someone, they have extra movement speed. This is especially good in game modes like Heist and Brawl Ball, where you can either score your own goal for the other team, or you can end up just pushing a brawl into high safe and getting some extra damage. In terms of gears, I like going speed and damage. Not speed and damage. I like going shield and damage here, as, you know, Willow is a thrower, weak HP. Having that shield gives it extra bit of protection. And Willow actually does a pretty good amount of damage here, especially when you're weak and you're behind the wall. You can just spam your shots and do a crazy amount of damage onto enemies. Next up is Doug, one of the worst brawlers in the game here. But if you were to go a good build with him, I recommend going Sand Attack. I recommend going the second gadget because, you know, having the extra bit of damage makes Doug viable on maps like Snake Prairie, for example. And then having self-service allows you to heal more, which is very, very important. And then I think the only builds you can do with Doug is go speed gear and damage gear. As speed gear, you need to just get in the bushes and just go aggro. And then damage gear is when you get into close engagements. You can pop this damage gear with this gadget as well, and it's a really good combination to have. Tuck, there's pretty much only one build to go, I think. Most of the time you go heal gear and damage gear is pretty good gears to have. And then in terms of gadgets, you can go rerouting. Rerouting allows you to replace posts, which is really important as sometimes people mess up their setups. And in terms of star powers, I recommend going Ticket Please because you don't really need 4 posts most of the time. Charlie, a pretty underrated brawler in my opinion. I recommend you going Spiders. If you're against a aggro comp like a Mortis or like a Melody, you can end up going Personal Space, which allows you to protect yourself and heal up 50% when you get out your cocoon. In terms of star powers, I like Slimy. Slimy leaves a trail and it's really good at scanning the lane and having a little bit of control. In terms of gears, I like doing maybe Speed and Vision. I think Speed and Vision is pretty good with Charlie. Or you can go this, or you can do something like this as well. These are pretty good builds to have. Meeple is a good last pick in Knockout or Bounty, potentially. I think it's pretty good. And it's also pretty good in Heist in terms of, if you go this damage on Heist, then on the Heist save, it does like 4 or 5k damage per shot, which is absolutely insane. This is the highest build I would probably do. And then any other normal build, I think going this, having a attack which steals ammo, allows you to win so many interactions. And then I mostly go slow here because you can actually snipe enemies, deal extra damage as well is very important with the slow. Melody, one of the best brawlers in the game here. This is pretty much the same build you do every time. You go fast speech, which gives you more movement speed per orb you have, and then you go interlude, which gives you a 10% shield per note. Bear in mind, if you have hypercharge popped, that means you're going to get a 60% shield, as is going to be 6 notes. In terms of gears, I recommend going shield and damage, as most of the time you're pretty much in enemies' faces. Damage gear is going to pop all the time, and shield allows you to actually get into their face. Lily is a pretty decent pick into Heist, and even some maps as a last pick is pretty strong here. You always go Vanish here. Vanish allows you to go into the realm, which is one of the most OP gadgets in the game. And then I always go Spiky. I think Spiky allows you to finish off more kills and keep that cycling going. In terms of gears, you can go shield gear or damage gear. If not, you can do this as well. This is a pretty aggressive build. Clancy is a pretty good tank counter. I like going this build with Clancy here. Having snappy shooting allows you to get double token. This is what helps you get to stage 3, which is one of the most OP brawlers in the game. And then Recon allows you to start the match with 3 tokens, gives you that extra little bit of buff. If you are facing against a triple tank comp, I recommend you going this here, as you're guaranteed to basically get level 3. And you just want to get as much ammo as possible. In terms of gears, I like going speed and damage. If not, I just go damage and shield. Mo is a really good brawler now. People have been hyping up so much, saying it's pretty strong here. This is the build I go with Mo here. Having this gadget allows you to cycle your super and farm it a lot quicker. And then having skipping stones allows your shot to go a little bit more further and have a chance of dealing more damage. In terms of gears, if you're playing a bushy map, I recommend going maybe like speed vision. Or if there's no grass here, then I recommend going shield and damage. Juju, one of my favorite brawlers, as I think it's been such a good brawler for a long time and has a little bit of skill. I always go elementalist because it allows you to have that shield, and that shield, even though it got nerfed, I still think that shield is good. And also having that invisibility is a pretty strong trait to have on some maps. In terms of gears, I always go shield and damage. If you're comfortable and you don't need some shield, then you can end up going this, which gives you a gadget cooldown reduction. Star power, if you're playing against a build, if you're playing against a comp that is pretty controlled and has low DPS, I recommend going protective shield, as it's harder to kill the Griff. If you're playing against a tank, I recommend going numbing needles, as you know the slow allows you to just get a 1 second slow into the enemy, and you can spam all 3 of your shots while the slow goes down. Ollie, one of the best brawlers in the game here. This is the build you go with Ollie. You either go speed and damage, or you go shield and damage here. You can also switch the shield for a gadget cooldown reduction. In terms of star powers, I think you only go Renegade, which gives you a 4k shield, which decays, but having a 4k shield when you go into action is pretty OP in my opinion. In terms of gadgets here, if you're playing against a comp where you need to jump over walls to catch up to enemies, I recommend to do it. If you're playing against tanks, I recommend going this gadget. It allows you to hypnotize, and you get it 5 seconds quicker than the other gadget. Finks, one of the brawlers that got a buff. I don't think Finks is good, but this is the build I go with it. I go with the first star power out, as it allows you to increase your main attack by 30%. And in terms of gears, I would go shield and damage maybe, or speed and vision, as you know, you can actually get some good scan onto this map, maybe on sneaky fields or something like that. It's good at scanning. It reminds me a little bit like Gale here in the way the shot pattern is. In terms of gadget, I like going no escape here, as you can sometimes freeze enemies and it allows your teammates to have time to focus them. I think this brawler is really good at just, you know, having a brawler where you don't need to communicate with your teammates. As you can just freeze them in time and they have time to react to it. First legendary is going to be Spike here. Spike, this is the build I go pretty much every time. Life Plant is pretty good to have against control brawlers. And then Fertilize is such an OP star power to have, as it pairs well with the Hypercharge. In terms of gears, I always go speed and vision on grass maps, or you can go like this build as well here. This build is pretty good. And if there's no bush or any grass, then I recommend going this, as this mythic gear is pretty strong. If you're playing heist, then I recommend you switching your gadget to this, as this will get insane amount of damage if anyone leaves you unsafe. Colt is pretty much a good heist brawler and is a really good counter to max. If you're playing heist, I recommend you going defense booster, as it allows you to get your hypercharge on safe a lot easier. In terms of damage, I always go the second star power, as Crow just needs as much damage as possible, and it's pretty annoying to deal with once you do get into that state where you're 50% below HP. Mythic gear is pretty important, combined with the star power, as you deal so much damage with it. Shield gear, because Crow has low HP. If you're playing against some tanks, then I recommend you going slowing Toxin, as it's pretty annoying to deal with. Leon receives a nerf here, but I still think Lollipop Drop will forever be the better gadget for it. And in terms of build, I recommend going shield and damage, or we go speed and damage, as Leon is one of the best assassins in the game. In terms of star power, if you're playing it in a knockout map, I recommend going heal. If you're playing it on a bounty map, I recommend going speed, as it allows you to cover a little bit of distance. And if you're playing against tanks or anything with DPS, then I recommend going Invisi-Heal most of the time. Sandy is a pretty decent brawler on maps where, you know, there's loads of bushes and it's mid-range. Mainly because Sweet Dreams is a really good gadget to have. In Brawl Ball, it allows you to score so many goals, and you can actually freeze enemies while you reload some ammo as well, which is pretty strong to have. In terms of gears, I always go speed and damage here most of the time. I don't really think about anything else. And then in terms of star power, Rude Stance is really good at scanning bushes, as that is what Sandy can be used for most of the time. Amber is a really good brawler for some DPS, and a brawler that can easily hit shots here. In terms of builds, if you're playing against sharpshooters or brawlers that are very, you know, very hard to juke, then I recommend going Firestar, which gives you a little bit of a speed boost and allows you to charge your flame, as it leaves a little bit of trail behind. In terms of gears, you can do so many different builds with Amber here. Speed vision, speed damage. This is a build I go most of the time here, which is shield and reload. Reload gear can be pretty good on Amber. In terms of star power, I always go Wild Flames. If you're against a Melody or a Mortis, then I recommend you going this type of build. Meg, I think, is pretty underrated in the meta. Ever since it got its hypercharge, I think it's a pretty good damage dealer. And it's pretty good against tanks as well, as it deals a lot of HP. As it has a lot of HP and it deals a lot of damage here. This is the build I go against tanks. If you want to keep your mech alive for longer, you go heal. If you're playing against sharpshooters, I recommend going toolbox. I think heavy metal is a pretty good star power to have all the time, as people can't just run into you once you're weak in the mecha. Heal gear and vision gear is good on maps with loads of grass. If you want a normal build, then I recommend going speed vision. If there's no bushes, then I recommend you going heal and damage, as that is pretty strong. Surge has been falling off the meta a little bit, but there's some maps where Surge is still good here. If you're playing against a comp that's really difficult to get level, I recommend going like this build or something like this is pretty good. If you're playing against tanks, I recommend you going this build, as you're guaranteed to get levels and just basically go crazy. Chester is a really good brawler. I think the hypercharge is pretty insane. I like going speed and vision with Chester. If there's no bushes, then you can go something like this. Always go first star power, and I think always go the second gadget. Colt is a good tank counter, especially against hypercharged brawlers like Melody, Mortis, and Sam. I recommend going replanting, as jumping allows you to go more aggro. If you're playing against brawlers you need a mute, for example Mortis, Melody, and Sam, you can sometimes go poison mushroom, which allows you to win so many more close range interactions. In terms of star power, I always like going the first star power, as having that extra 30% damage per shot is really good. And in terms of builds, I like going speed and damage. If there's no bushes, then you can just go shield and damage. Kit is a really good brawler to have. If you're combining it with a Miko, you can end up going this burger gadget. If you have a Hank as well, or an Ollie, you can also go this cheeseburger gadget. If not, if you're playing as an assassin, then you can go cardboard box, which is one of the best gadgets in the game. In terms of builds here, you can end up going something like this, which is pretty good, or this is what I recommend. And always go the second gadget unless you're playing, always go the second star power unless you're playing showdown, which is where you'd go this. Draco used to be really good here, but it's fallen off the meta a little bit, but this is the best build for Draco here. Last Stand allows you to stay at 1 HP for 2 seconds. You're basically immune to any damage, which allows you to cycle your super pretty easily. Most of the time you go speed and damage. If you want to go something like this also works. And then star power, you always go shredding. If you're playing heist, there are circumstances where you can try out this star power, which you can basically mark the save, and it allows your whole team to deal extra damage. Kenji is a really good assassin, and this is pretty much the only build you go Kenji here. You go the second gadget and the second star power. Shield and damage is what I would do. If there's loads of bushes, then maybe you can go speed and damage as well. With Lumi, I think it depends on what type of build you want here, because there is a clear build where if you go first gadget and first star power, you're able to just have unlimited burns. It's similar to like how Pearl would work, but with just range. And then if you want to go something slow, which I guess you would do against tanks, you can go the second gadget and the second star power. In terms of gears with Lumi, I recommend going shield and damage, or you can go like shield and vision. I think that would be pretty solid. But anyways guys, that's me wrapping up the best build for all 90 brawlers. I hope you liked this video. Make sure to give a like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.